And welcome. It is Wednesday, August 11th, and we have a new name for the podcast. It is no longer the J&C Broadcasters Podcast. We did a little bit of rebranding. It is now 901 Sports Talk. And I'm your host, as always, Jared DiGattano. And unfortunately, guys, I have some bad news. Carter does have to go to school at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and he will be leaving in a couple of weeks. And I've been talking to him recently, and we thought it'd be best if he took some time off from the podcast to really help him get situated and settled at Knoxville. And just for the immediate future and the foreseeable future, it will be just me. Hopefully, he can come back. If not, hopefully I can keep you interested and keep you checking in and logging in. Today's podcast really has a focus on the Grizzlies. We talked a lot about the Tigers on Friday, so I figured we'd talk a little bit about the Grizzlies today. I do want to bring up three topics. I think the first topic we're going to talk about is the Summer League and how we look and what the Summer League really means for this Memphis Grizzlies and what it means for a few players. Then I'll talk about two separate pieces. One piece that I saw, both were by the Beale Street Bears. It's a wonderful website. If you're really into reading about Memphis Grizzlies basketball, I'd suggest you go check them out, especially these two articles. The first article is how Steven Adams fits within the Grizzlies. And I think we talked about that when the trade happened for Jonas, but I think I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. And then the other one was three candidates who could break into the starting lineup this season for the Grizzlies. And so I'll talk about that one a little bit too later on. But I did say I wanted to start with Summer League basketball. It is in full swing and it has started. The Grizzlies are currently playing Game 2. Right now there's about a minute left in the third quarter, and I am currently watching it in the background. So I do apologize if I'm a little distracted. I'm trying to get some information for you guys. That way I can be as knowledgeable and seem as just as knowledgeable and as full of ideas as I can be. This is a very interesting Summer League for the Grizzlies, because Summer League in general is a chance to see guys that normally wouldn't play in the preseason and the regular season. I believe preseason is a real build-up for the regular season, and you see your starters kind of amp up those minutes and start pushing themselves harder. That way they're ready to go by the regular season. So Summer League's really an opportunity for guys that really don't play a lot to prove themselves and make an NBA roster, or even start fighting for more minutes. And obviously, this is an interesting Summer League because if you look at the Grizzlies Summer League roster, it's got a lot of rotation players, or a lot of guys that are fighting for rotation minutes. Pretty much everybody except Ja, Jaren, Dylan, Kyle, Steven, Tyus, DeAnthony Melton, and Brandon Clark are on the Summer League roster. I don't count Eric Bledsoe because, like we talked about, I don't think he's going to play a game in the Grizzlies jersey. But, I mean, you see guys from Zaire, Williams, Santi Aldama, Desmond Bain, Killian Tilly, Sean McDermott, Sam Merrill, Xavier Tillman, John Conchar. I mean, those are all guys that you could maybe see be the back half of the Grizzlies roster. And so I think it's fun to see. One of the things that I did note, and they talked about this in the broadcast today, was the Grizzlies, you can see, are kind of letting anybody play point guard. It's whoever gets rebound, your job is to be ball handling, your job is to go. And I believe this is due to the fact that the Grizzlies want to get faster. They think that they're the best when they're on the open floor and they're running fast breaks. And they want more playmakers outside of Ja and Dylan. And so when they're forcing these guys to get better as playmakers, or they're telling them they need to be playmakers, It allows you to see which ones can you say, oh, we can let him get it. If he gets a defensive rebound, we can let him run the floor. And that's the great part about Summer League. Not only is it almost like an interview process for players, but it's a laboratory for players. It allows them to test out new things. It allows them to do things that the team is asking them to do without there being the stress of they're going to lose minutes. I think a great example of that is you can obviously see within the first 2 games, someone like Desmond Bane, they're pushing for him to be more of a ball handler, more pick and roll, more running the offense kind of guy. And so far, he's shown great success. Obviously, he had 32 in the first game, and that was due to great shooting. And he hasn't been able to produce that level of success in the second game, but you see him being successful as a ball handler and controlling the offense. And I think that's important to see in today's NBA because with how much faster the NBA is getting, you need more playmakers. More guys that can be able to step out and show comfortability from beyond the paint. And a great example of that is the 2021 NBA champions Milwaukee Bucks. Look at their roster. Giannis is a playmaker. Chris Middleton's a playmaker. PJ Tucker's a good playmaker. Drew Holiday's a playmaker. Guys like Brook Lopez can, pass and shoot very well from outside the paint. You have to be able to be a good, teams that have good playmakers and more than one usually show success because they're not leaning on one player to make stuff happen. So you can kind of see that with the Grizzlies. They're forcing a lot of different guys to be those playmakers. And I honestly think there's a lot of players that are really showing you that they're able to do that, such as Desmond Bane and another guy in Xavier Tillman. I think he's really showing you that he has the ability to do that too. One of the things that also surprised me is the shooting of some of these guys. Sam Merrill and John Conchar are showing great shooting ability. And, they might be fighting for that. Them and Sean McDermott are really fighting for that kind of 11th or 12th spot in the rotation. And so it's interesting to see them shoot so well because you did trade Grayson Allen, which I understand. You were going to have to start paying him some kind of money. Probably not humongous money, but money because he's a shooter and there's no such thing as too many shooters on a team. And so you went for a younger piece that might not be as productive or as good of a shooter. But you also got some draft capital too, which helps. I do suggest if you have the time, go watch a game. Watch these young guys because a lot of them are playing for that 10th, 11th spot, and you'll be interested to see some of the stuff that happens. You'll see a lot of more aggressiveness from players that you might not see that from because they don't have anybody they don't have a Ja or a Jaren or a Dylan they can throw the ball to. It's really fun to see. One player that's really stood out to me so far is Xavier Tillman. You knew he was that big-bodied, kind of undersized defensive center, but he's really shown you his mid-range playmaking ability over the past 2 games, and it's been fun to see. I think he's going to fit in very well either behind Steven Adams or, hint, maybe even in front of Steven Adams. But that's a guy that I'm really interested in seeing. That actually leads me into my next segment. I talked about 3 guys that could potentially break out and make the starting lineup at some point in this season, barring injury. And I think the first one and the most obvious one is Zaire Williams. I don't believe he is going to come off and start at the beginning of the year. I think he's going to come off the bench. He is still a work in progress. But you don't draft the guy at 10 for him to be a consistent bench piece. You got to expect at some point he's probably going to start playing with that starting group. And I expect if you see some offensive availability and some shooting, him to take Kyle's place a lot earlier than you expect. And yes, Kyle would be the outlier in this situation just because it won't be Ja, it won't be Dylan, and it won't be Jaren. So it's either Steven or Kyle. And you don't believe Jaren's ready to be that center yet, so if it was a guard or a forward, it would probably be Kyle. And that's fine because then it moves Kyle to the bench and adds more versatility defensively. But at the same time, you're starting to look for that third piece because in the back of your mind, you don't know if you're going to bring Kyle back because he has an expiring contract. So who's that 3 guy? Or who's the 2 and moves Dylan to the 3? And maybe it's Zaire. If he shows good shooting and explosive ability, I think he has that ability to take over his spot at some point. Another guy that I think could maybe make the starting lineup at some point in the season is Desmond Bane. Obviously, his shooting is great. I talked about his playmaking ability that he's showing in Summer League. If he can start showing more of that, you know the 3 and D build is kind of there, but if he can start showing more of a playmaking ability, he might move into the 2 and allow Dylan to slide to the 3 again. And the big thing right now when it comes to the development of Ja Morant is he needs to develop as a shooter. And to help him do that, you need to put shooters around him. And Kyle's a good shooter, but if you can get an upgrade there at the shooting position, like the shooting guard position, or even the small forward position, and get a better shooter that doesn't completely sacrifice defensive ability or playmaking ability, I think you have to take it. And I think that's why Desmond Bane could be one of the more likely candidates to take over as a starting spot. If Kyle is struggling shooting-wise, you could see Desmond kind of slide into that 2 and maybe Dylan slide into the 3 position. Or even Desmond could play the 3 to allow not only the floor to open up for Ja, but maybe even take some pressure off his hands with the ball handling ability. And the last guy that I think has the opportunity to start this year is Xavier Tillman. Steven Adams right now you have to expect is your penciled in starter. And I don't expect that to change. But maybe Tillman shows you something with his shooting and his versatility rebounding wise. The only thing that's really Steven Adams' biggest default is his offensive ability. And you feel like Tillman has the higher ceiling offensively than Steven does. And you do lose a step defensively, but you don't lose a humongous step. And I think it also allows you to become more versatile and switchable on defense. So if you see Steven struggle early on, maybe you go to Tillman. And I don't think you would lose a whole lot. He's shown a lot, especially in the Summer League, that he can not only bring the ball up the floor and be a playmaker, but he can be a playmaker from beyond the paint. He's shown a lot of mid-range, standing, setting solid screens, throwing backdoor, precision backdoor cuts, all that fun stuff. So those are 3 guys in my book that you have to be interested to watch. And it really, at the end of the day, it really depends on the development of that starting group. I think the Grizzlies are in a great position to where, since they are so deep, if a player is struggling, especially in the starting group, you're not losing like a huge chunk of talent if you move him to the bench to gain some confidence. And so, from the Grizzlies' perspective, you've got to ask yourself now, your starting group is going to be Jaren, Ja, Dylan, Kyle, and Steven. Barring any trades, what's your second group look like? I think Tillman has really shown you that he can be your backup center. Clark has most likely your backup power forward. Tyus will be your backup point guard. Desmond Bane's probably your backup 2, and Zaire's your backup 3. But what do you do with the rest of the guys? What do you do with Sam Merrill? What do you do with John Conchar? What do you do with Sean McDermott? What do you do with Santi Aldama? And I think that really begs into the question of what are you going to do with these expiring contracts? What are you going to do with Tyus's and Kyle's expiring contracts? What are you going to look like not in the 2021-22 season, but the 22-23 season? And where do you expect your team to fit in after that? I think that really answers the question on what you're going to do with Merrill and Conchar and Aldama and McDermott. But it really does lead into the next part about talking about Steven Adams. I told you there's an article that was released on Beale Street Bears about how does Steven Adams fit with the Grizzlies. And if you have the time, it's an excellent read. You should really look it up and read it. It talks about how Steven, and I can agree here, you do lose that step offensively. You don't lose a step rebounding-wise, and I feel like you take a step up defensively. And he can really help Xavier Tillman grow as a better defender, even though Tillman is a good defender. But he also, from the financial standpoint, Jonas's contract expires this year, and Jonas is going to get paid. Barring a major injury or a drop-off, Jonas is most likely going to get paid this year. And so, if Steven Adams performs, you have him for 2 years under contract. And if he performs for those 2 years, at that point you have expected to find your backup center, or maybe even Jaren slid into your center role. Or maybe you go with someone like Tillman. If he doesn't perform and you decide to move on anyway, you do. If he doesn't perform and you're like, maybe we need him back, you're not suffering a huge contract. He is younger than Jonas. And if you were going to extend Jonas, you were extending an aging center probably a large amount of money, which doesn't help you when it comes to trying to extend Ja or Jaren or even Dylan when that time comes again back around. So by trading for Steven, it allows you to not only have more flexibility into the future, but if he does perform and you decide to extend him, he is younger. And if he doesn't perform and you decide to extend him anyway, it's not for as much money. So from financially, that's what makes sense. But when it comes to pure basketball sense, I think it helps because it now allows you to really test Jaren. Ja and Dylan are going to be two of your top 3 scorers. And now instead of putting all the offensive pressure on Jonas to be one of those top 3, you put it back on Jaren to be one of your top 3. But at the same time, you're not physically taxing him on the defensive side because Jonas was a liability defensively. Steven won't be. And so it really says to Jaren, are you going to be our number 2 or number 3 guy? Or are you going to be someone that is just going to be a starter but not a humongous rotational piece? So, still looking back on it, Jonas and whoever the Pelicans picked at their picks for pretty much Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe, which you still don't know what you're going to get from that, and Zaire Williams. I'm not complaining. Like, it's a pretty good trade-off. You do get younger, and it allows you more, like I said, more cap flexibility. And one of the big reasons why you need to take that home run swing and you feel like this was it. So it'll be interesting to see. I think the Grizzlies are not done. Obviously, the Grayson Allen trade was one of the dominoes, but I do believe we're going to have a few more between now and then when the season starts. I still think there's some feeling out for the Grizzlies, especially if guys like McDermott and Conchar continue to play the way they are in Summer League. It really makes you determine if you're going to, you've got about 13 or 14 guys right now that are really good players, and you want to cut that down once again to 9 or 10. So the Grizzlies are not done making moves. They're going to continue to make moves. It'll just be interesting to see who's next. Obviously, I think Bledsoe's next. I don't know about Brandon Clark. I think Tillman might be your guy to go, especially since you went Aldama in the first round. And Carter brought this up last week. If you stash him, you avoid that question with Brandon Clark. But if you don't, maybe Brandon Clark. I love him. I do. I think just because he was first team All-Rookie 2 years ago adds some value. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm excited. It's a great time to be a Memphis sports fan. You know, from the Tigers in both basketball and football and the Grizzlies. Memphis sports is on the upswing, and that is so fun to see. And I believe that's because we are such an energetic fan base that any signs of success from any one of those three teams, and the Memphians will flock to sporting events if they're allowed. I mean, a great example is when College Game Day said, Memphis, we're coming. Memphis versus MSU, we're going to be there. And all of a sudden, Memphis just went into a frenzy. They're like, we're going to shut down Beale Street from 6 o'clock in the morning, and you better be ready. And then the game came, and the stadium was packed. It was loud. I was at that game. I tell people that was probably one of my favorite Memphis football experiences, that and when we won the AAC. But that was, that environment, I think, was the true epitome of what Memphis sports fans are. They're crazy. They love their Tigers. They love the Grizzlies. And they love to get out there and support them. And they love to just give the other teams as much ruckus and try to disrupt them as much as they can. So, like I said, fall and winter are the best times in Memphis when it comes to sports, because that's when basketball and football get their swing. And so I'm excited. I hope you're excited just as much. I will be back on Friday. Still haven't figured out what I'm going to talk about yet. Leave a comment. Leave a suggestion. What should I talk about on Friday? Give me some big news, right? Give me something to talk about. I love to hear from you guys. Until then, this is the 901 Sports Talk Podcast, and I'm your host, Jared DeGaetano. Enjoy the rest of your week, guys.